The first thing the Duke of Stonemere saw upon entering his breakfast room was not the waiting coffee, nor the folded newspapers, nor the pale winter light lying across the polished table, but his wife's empty chair and a packet of legal papers placed squarely upon his silver plate. London, 1863, had woken under a low grey sky, and Stonemere House in Mayfair had arranged itself, as it always did, around dignity. The footman stood silent in dark livery. The sideboard shone with covered dishes. The long windows held back the morning chill behind heavy blue draperies. Everything was correct. Everything was elegant. Everything was wrong. Adrian Vale, Duke of Stonemere, stopped 3 paces inside the room, his gloved hand still resting on the door handle. For a man who had spent his adult life mastering his expression before hostile committees, ambitious lords, and ministers who smiled with knives behind their teeth, he went very still. The chair opposite his place was drawn back by an inch, as though Verity had risen from it only moments ago. But no cup waited there, no folded napkin. No small vase of violets, though she had once placed them at breakfast every Tuesday because, she had said on the first week of their marriage, a house needed at least one unnecessary kindness. He had not thought of that sentence in nearly 3 years. Now it returned with the force of an accusation. "Where is her Grace?" he asked. His voice did not rise. That was why every servant in the room grew paler. Mr. Bell, the butler, took one careful step forward. He had served 3 generations of Vales, and had survived 2 duchesses, 1 ruinous heir, and a dowager who could freeze a room with a teaspoon. "Her Grace is not at breakfast, Your Grace." Adrian turned his head slowly. "I can see that." The butler swallowed. She left the house before dawn. Silence entered the room so completely that the small clock on the mantel seemed suddenly impertinent. Adrian looked again at the plate. The packet had been tied with a narrow black silk ribbon, not twine, not legal tape silk. It was a woman's ribbon, severe and deliberate, the kind used for morning correspondence or private letters one did not wish to see touched by careless hands. Upon the top page, in a clerk's neat script, were the words, "Deed of separation and private settlement between His Grace, the Duke of Stonemere, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Stonemere." Adrian did not move for several seconds. Then he crossed the room, removed his gloves with controlled precision, and lifted the packet from his plate. The silver beneath it was cold. "Who placed this here?" "James, Your Grace," Mr. Bell said, "at Her Grace's instruction." One of the younger footmen looked as though his knees might fail him. Adrian did not look at him yet. He untied the ribbon. Page after page unfolded beneath his hand. The language was smooth, expensive, and poisonous. Her Grace, desiring the preservation of domestic peace. Her Grace, acknowledging the insufficiency of the marital union. Her Grace, accepting a generous, independent allowance. Her Grace, surrendering all claims to household management, estate influence, charitable accounts, and future interference in the affairs of the House of Vale. Adrian read faster. No expression crossed his face, but something behind his ribs tightened with each line. He had signed no such instruction. He had spoken to no solicitor about separation. He had not even seen Verity in private for more than a few minutes since his return to London. And that thought, which should have served as his defense, instead settled on him like guilt. He turned to the final page. There should have been signatures there, his own, hers, witnesses, seals. Instead, the page was nearly blank. In the place where Verity's name had been prepared in pencil for signing, she had written one sentence in black ink, small and steady enough to chill him more than anger would have done. The Duchess signed nothing. Adrian read it once, then again. The room did not breathe. He looked at the ink, at the discipline of every letter, Verity's hand. He knew it. though shame struck him at how rarely he had been required to know it. His wife had not pleaded. She had not accused him in a scene. She had not waited in the hall with reddened eyes, asking why. She had left him a document meant to erase her, and upon it she had placed the single truth no one in his house could soften. "Mr. Bell," he said, "no one leaves Stonemere House until I have spoken with them." The butler bowed. "Yes, your grace, no letters are to be carried out. No callers are to be admitted beyond the front hall. No message is to be sent to Mr. Croft." At that name the younger footman flinched. Adrian saw it. "James," he said. The young man stepped forward at once, colour draining from his face. "Yes, your grace. You placed this packet on my plate." "Yes, your grace. At her grace's instruction." "Yes, your grace." "When?" James kept his eyes fixed somewhere near Adrian's waistcoat. "At 6:30, your grace. She gave it to me herself before she left." "What did she say?" The footman hesitated. Mr. Bell gave him the smallest warning glance, but Adrian saw that too. "Answer me exactly." James drew a breath. "She said, His Grace must receive it before anyone else can correct the story." The words struck with quiet force. Before anyone else could correct the story. Not explain, not deliver. Correct. Adrian lowered the document. "And did she leave alone? No crest carriage, your grace. No maid." A hired cab was waiting at the corner of Brook Street. A hired cab. His Duchess, leaving his house before dawn, without the Vale crest, without a maid, without the protection of rank made visible. Adrian looked toward the empty chair. He could picture her there, because memory had become cruelly exact now that she was gone. Verity, sitting straight-backed in pale blue silk. Verity lowering her eyes when his mother corrected the placement of a dish that Verity had ordered. Verity listening while Lady Maribel Fane laughed too brightly across the table. Verity's hand once, trembling near the teapot before she steadied it with such grace that he had dismissed the motion as fatigue. He had been busy. Parliament had been difficult. The railway bill had nearly collapsed. His mother had said Verity preferred quiet. His solicitor had said household matters were settled. Everyone had spoken of her in sentences that allowed him to remain distant. And he, who prided himself on detecting falsehood in men twice his age and 3 times as practiced, had accepted the convenience of not seeing his own wife. "Where is the Dowager Duchess?" he asked. "In her morning room, your grace." "Has she been informed her grace has left?" Mr. Bell's pause was brief, but not brief enough. "I believe her grace the Dowager was aware of the possibility." Adrian folded the papers back together, not with haste, but with a care that made the action more dangerous. "Was she aware of this document?" "I could not say, your grace." "You could." The butler's mouth tightened. Loyalty fought with fear. Fear lost. "Mr. Croft called yesterday afternoon. He was received by her grace the Dowager. Later, he was shown to the small drawing room, where her grace the Duchess was waiting." Adrian's hand closed around the black ribbon. Who else was present? Lady Maribel Fane. The name rested in the air like perfume gone sour. Adrian had tolerated Lady Maribel because his mother found her useful at dinners, and because Verity never objected. He remembered Maribel taking the place beside the tea table that should have belonged to the Duchess. He remembered his mother saying, with silken impatience, that Verity had no taste for society. He remembered Verity saying nothing. He had mistaken silence for agreement. That error now stood before him in the shape of an empty chair. "Bring me the household account books for the last 6 months," Adrian said. "The charity ledgers, the servants' pension records, all correspondence from Mr. Croft. And send word to Sir Edmund Roth that I require his attendance today." Mr. Bell bowed. "Yes, your grace." James, the footman, stiffened. "Yes, your grace. You will tell me if anyone attempts to frighten you into forgetting what her grace said." The young man's face changed. It was not relief exactly. It was the first fragile sign that someone in this house had been waiting for authority to turn its head in the right direction. Yes, Your Grace. I will. Adrian looked once more at the sentence written on the final page. The Duchess signed nothing. No flourish, no plea, no tear blotted the ink. It was not the writing of a woman defeated. It was the writing of a woman who had reached the end of being managed. He retied the black silk ribbon, slid the packet beneath his arm, and turned toward the door. In the corridor beyond, the house seemed to listen. Portraits of dead Vales watched from the walls, stern men and pale women preserved in oil, all of them trained to value name, land, bloodline, silence. Adrian had inherited their title, their estate, their enemies, and their talent for mistaking control for honor. For the first time that morning, he wondered what else he had inherited without questioning it. He did not go to his mother first. He went instead to the West Wing, where the Duchess's apartments were supposed to be. The corridor there was colder. A dust sheet covered a console table. 2 landscapes had been removed, leaving pale rectangles on the wallpaper. When he opened the door to Verity's sitting room, he found not the feminine disorder he had half expected, but absence arranged with terrifying neatness. The writing desk was cleared. The hearth was unlit. A single calling card lay torn in half beside the inkstand. Lady Maribel Fane. Beneath it rested a narrow sheet of paper in Verity's hand. Not a letter, a list. 3 servants' pensions delayed. 2 charity disbursements altered. 1 instruction issued in the Duchess's name without her consent. Adrian stood over it, the false settlement beneath his arm, while the quiet of the room pressed against him. She had left him clues because she no longer trusted him with her pain. She had left him facts because facts, unlike wives, could not be dismissed as delicate, emotional, or inconvenient. Behind him, hurried footsteps approached and stopped. Mr. Bell's voice came from the threshold, low and strained. Your Grace. Adrian did not turn. What is it? Her Grace the Dowager requests to know whether you will attend her before receiving callers. No, the answer came at once. Your Grace. Adrian picked up the torn calling card and placed it inside the folded settlement. Tell my mother I will attend her when I have finished reading what my wife tried to tell this house. Another silence. This one was different. It carried shock through the corridor like a draft. And Mr. Bell? Yes, Your Grace. Adrian finally turned, his face calm in a way that made the butler straighten. Find out where the hired cab took the Duchess. Mr. Bell bowed. At once. Adrian looked past him, down the long corridor his wife had walked before dawn, without the crest, without escort, without certainty that he would understand. Somewhere in London, Verity Vale had chosen dignity over protection that had failed her. Somewhere, she was waiting for the story to be corrected, or for him to prove that he would let the lie stand because truth was inconvenient. He looked down at the black ribbon in his hand. It was a small thing, a mourning thing, a warning. And when you find her, he said, you will not ask her to return. Mr. Bell stilled. No, Your Grace, no. Adrian's voice lowered. You will tell her the Duke of Stonemere has received her answer. He looked once more at the empty room, at the cold hearth, at the torn card, at life removed so quietly that only a guilty man would call it sudden. And then you will ask what she wishes him to do next. 1 week before Adrian Vale stood in his cold breakfast room with his wife's absence in his hands, Verity had been summoned to the small drawing room as though she were a servant who had misplaced the silver. The summons had not used that word, of course. Nothing in Stonemere House was ever cruel enough to be honest at first touch. The note had arrived on a salver at 3:30, written in the elegant, pointed hand of the Dowager Duchess. requesting her Grace's presence for a matter of domestic arrangement. Domestic arrangement. Verity had looked at those two words until they blurred. In the language of the House of Vale, they meant another door closing quietly in front of her. She had dressed with care because dignity was the last possession no one could take without her permission. Pale grey silk, high collar, pearl pins, gloves mended so neatly at the thumb that only she knew the thread did not match. When she entered the small drawing room, Theodora Vale was already seated beside the fire, as straight as a carved saint and twice as unforgiving. Lady Maribel occupied the chair nearest the tea table, pouring as if the cups belonged to her. Mr. Silas Croft stood by the window, with a leather folio beneath one arm. 3 people arranged before Verity like a judgment. "Ah," the dowager said, "at last." Verity glanced at the clock on the mantel. She was precisely on time. She did not say so. She crossed the room and inclined her head. "Your Grace." "Lady Maribel, Mr. Croft." Maribel gave a bright little smile. "My dear Verity, you look pale. I told her Grace you should not be troubled with accounts today." "How kind," Verity said. "I was unaware my complexion had become a matter for committee." Mr. Croft coughed softly. The dowager did not smile. This is exactly the tone that has made matters difficult. Verity removed one glove finger by finger, buying a few seconds to study the room. On the table lay the household key ring, her key ring. The one presented to her on the first morning after her marriage, when the housekeeper had curtsied and called her mistress of Stonemere House. Beside sat a stack of invitations tied in blue ribbon, several already marked with Maribel's initials. Farther down was the charity ledger. Verity had requested 3 times and had been told was misplaced. "I had believed matters were difficult because servants' pensions have been delayed," Verity said. "And because 2 disbursements meant for the Briarwick Widows' Fund appear to have passed through Mr. Croft's office before vanishing into fog." Maribel's hand trembled just enough to rattle the teacup. The dowager's eyes sharpened. "You see, Mr. Croft, this is the hysteria I mentioned." Verity looked at the solicitor. "Do I appear hysterical to you, Sir Mr.?" Croft had the polished face of a man who had long ago learned to hide discomfort behind good tailoring. "No, Your Grace. Only distressed. An interesting distinction. It allows you to pity me while ignoring the question." The dowager set down her cup. The tiny sound landed hard. "Enough. The management of this house has suffered because you insist on meddling in matters beyond your strength." Verity let her gaze move to the key ring. "Beyond my strength or beyond my obedience?" A pause followed. It was not long, but it was enough. Verity felt the answer in it. For nearly 3 years, she had learned the geography of exclusion. First, a dinner invitation sent to the dowager for approval instead of to her. Then a footman instructed to bring household books to the morning room, rather than the Duchess's desk. Then Maribel, smiling in silk, asked to assist with seating plans because Verity must not tire herself. Then the apartments in the West Wing closed for repairs that never began. A wife could be removed from a house without being sent away. One only had to make her unnecessary in the rooms where she had once belonged. "His Grace trusts me to preserve the dignity of the family," the dowager said. The mention of Adrian's trust touched Verity more sharply than the insult. She kept her hands still in her lap. "His Grace has not spoken to me about surrendering my duties. His Grace is occupied with affairs that matter beyond curtains, pensions, and village women who imagine grief entitles them to coin." Verity looked up then. "Do not speak of widows that way in my presence." Maribel drew in a soft breath, delighted and alarmed. The dowager's mouth thinned. "There. That is the sentimental weakness I feared. A Duchess of Stonemere must understand scale. House first, name first, bloodline first. And truth? Verity asked. Where is truth placed? Truth, said the dowager, is often whatever prevents ruin. Mr. Croft opened his folio before the silence could grow teeth. Your Grace, I have prepared a document meant to spare all parties unnecessary distress. He laid the papers on the table between them. The top sheet was thick and expensive. The script was neat. The words were gentle in the way a locked door could be gentle if it closed without noise. Verity did not touch it. What document? A private settlement, Mr. Croft said. A generous one. Ordered by whom? He smiled as if patience were a gift he was bestowing. In accordance with the interests of His Grace and the House of Vale. That was not my question. The dowager leaned forward. Adrian will not thank you for forcing him into an ugly scene. At the sound of his Christian name in his mother's mouth, Verity felt something inside her grow very quiet. Adrian had been distant, yes. Cool, controlled, absent even when present. But she had once believed there was a line he would not cross without looking at her first. She had lived on that belief longer than pride should have allowed. Mr. Croft turned the pages, pointing with one narrow finger. The terms are more than fair. An independent allowance, a residence suitable to your rank, and no public charge made against you. In return, you will withdraw from active domestic management, refrain from inquiry into family accounts, and accept that any future arrangements concerning the succession or household governance belong solely to His Grace. Verity finally picked up the document. It was heavier than she expected. Pages often were when they tried to bury a woman alive with courtesy. There is no charge to be made against me, she said. Therefore, the absence of one is not generosity. Maribel's sweetness sharpened. Verity, don't make this harder. It's a kindness, truly. London can be so cruel when a marriage becomes visibly strained. Has mine become visible? Verity asked. Or have you been asked to make it so? Maribel's colour rose. The dowager stood. Everyone else in the room seemed smaller when she did. You have given Stonemere no heir. You have shown no talent for society. You have encouraged servants to forget their place by treating their troubles as if they were your own. You have questioned accounts you do not understand. My son requires peace, not a wife who turns disappointment into moral theatre. The words entered Verity one by one. No heir, no talent, no place. They were not new wounds, but old ones pressed with gloved fingers. For a moment she saw herself from across every dinner table of the past 3 years, sitting upright while Maribel laughed near. Adrian's chair, while the dowager corrected menus, while Adrian thanked his mother for managing what Verity had already arranged. She saw herself becoming smaller because shrinking had seemed more graceful than begging to be seen. That ended in the small drawing room, not with a shout, not with tears, with one decision. Verity set the settlement down. No. Mr. Croft blinked. Your Grace, I will not sign. The dowager's expression did not change, but the room cooled. You misunderstand your position. No. I have understood it at last. Verity reached for the household key ring and closed her fingers around it before the dowager could stop her. You wish me to leave quietly, blamed politely, paid sufficiently, and remembered inaccurately. You are being offered protection, the dowager said. Protection from what? From accounts I did not alter, from a scandal I did not create, from a marriage no one asked me whether I wished to abandon. Mr. Croft's voice lowered. Your Grace, don't be rash. It's only a signature. Verity turned to him. A signature is a name. A name is not only ink. For the first time, his confidence faltered. She saw it and understood that fear did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it appeared as a solicitor's glance toward an older woman by the fire. Verity looked down at the prepared line awaiting her hand. Lady Verity Vale, Duchess of Stonemere. They had left space for her erasure in beautiful script. From the table, she picked up a narrow black silk ribbon that had been lying beside the papers, perhaps brought to bind them after obedience was secured. It was finer than legal tape, cool between her fingers. She gathered the pages, aligned their edges, and tied them with careful precision. "What are you doing?" Maribel whispered. "Answering," Verity said. She took up the pen, dipped it once, and turned to the final page. Not on the signature line, never there. Beneath it, in the blank white space where truth still had room, she wrote one sentence. Her hand did not shake. When the ink dried, she closed the packet. The dowager stared at it, as though it had become something indecent. "If you leave this room with that document, you will regret it." Verity lifted her gloves. "I have regretted silence more." No one stopped her as she crossed to the door. That was the last mercy of rank. Even those determined to destroy a duchess remembered not to seize one. In the corridor, James the footman stood rigid beside a console table, pretending not to have heard. Verity paused before him. His face was young, frightened, and too honest for the house he served. She held out the packet. "James," he bowed quickly. "Your Grace? Tomorrow morning, before anyone can remove it, place this on His Grace's breakfast plate." His eyes widened. On His Grace's plate, yes. She looked back once at the closed drawing-room door. Behind it, voices had begun again, lower now and more dangerous. His Grace must receive it before anyone else can correct the story. James took the packet with both hands. "Yes, Your Grace." Verity released it. In that small surrender, she felt the first breath of freedom and the first edge of fear. By dawn, she would leave Stonemere House, without the crest, without a maid, and without knowing whether Adrian would read her answer as accusation or inconvenience. But she knew one thing with a steadiness that carried her down the corridor. They could take her rooms. They could take her keys for a time. They could invite another woman to pour tea from her table. But they would not take her name by asking her to hand it over politely. Adrian did not go to his mother at once, and that delay was the first insult Theodora Vale had received from her son in years. He remained in Verity's cold sitting room with the false settlement beneath his arm and the torn calling card in his hand, looking at the narrow list she had left beside the inkstand. 3 servants' pensions delayed, 2 disbursements altered, 1 instruction issued in the Duchess's name without consent. No exclamation marked the page, no appeal for sympathy. Only facts, lined up as neatly as soldiers before battle. The restraint of it unsettled him more than tears would have done. He had seen men lie under oath with sweat on their faces. He had seen noblemen disguise greed as patriotism and cowardice as prudence. Yet this quiet sheet of paper accused him more precisely than any enemy had managed. He had not forged his wife's name. He had not ordered her rooms emptied. He had not asked another woman to sit where she belonged. But he had allowed a house to become accustomed to her disappearance while she was still living inside it. "Your Grace, Mr." Bell remained at the threshold, too disciplined to enter without permission. "The Dowager Duchess asks whether you intend to keep her waiting." Adrian folded Verity's list and placed it inside his coat. "Yes." The butler blinked once. "Shall I say that to Her Grace?" "You may say I am occupied with Her Grace the Duchess." The correction fell softly. Mr. Bell understood it. His shoulders, held stiff for so long, altered by a fraction. Adrian turned to the desk. The drawers were unlocked. That struck him next. Verity had not hidden these notes in a panic. She had left them for him to find, which meant she had decided he was either capable of seeing the truth or guilty enough to ignore it. The first drawer held old household menus, several with changes made in another hand. Maribel's hand, perhaps, with its showy loops and ornamental confidence. The second contained unanswered calling cards. Some were from women who had once courted Verity's company after the wedding. Most had not been returned. A few bore small pencil marks beside the names, not in Verity's script. Accept, delay, refuse. The Duchess had been managed by committee. Adrian closed the drawer with care. Send for Mrs. Larkin, he said. The housekeeper arrived within minutes, her cap immaculate and her face guarded. Mrs. Larkin had served under Adrian's grandmother, and had the kind of spine that came from knowing every cupboard in a noble house, and every sin hidden behind its polished doors. Shikyo? Grace. When were these apartments closed? 3 weeks ago, Your Grace. By whose order? Her Grace, the Dowager, said. The west chimney smoked and repairs were needed. Adrian looked toward the hearth. It was clean, cold, and perfectly sound. Repairs begun. Mrs. Larkin's mouth tightened. No, Your Grace. Where was the Duchess moved? The blue room near the nursery passage. The nursery passage. A corridor of unused rooms kept ready for heirs that had never come, far from the main stair, far from the morning room, far from any visitor who might accidentally remember that Stonemere House already had a Duchess. Adrian felt something in him harden. Did Her Grace object? Mrs. Larkin looked down at her hands. Her Grace asked whether Your Grace had approved it. And what was she told? That Your Grace did not concern yourself with domestic arrangements. It was a sentence he had heard before. Perhaps he had even said something near it in impatience, half distracted by a dispatch, not knowing how useful it would become in other mouths. A careless word from a duke could build a prison if others found profit in the walls. Who carried her writing desk from this room? He asked. 2 footmen, Your Grace. By the Dowager Duchess's instruction. And the key ring? Mrs. Larkin hesitated. It was requested yesterday. Requested. Taken, she said quietly. Her Grace the Duchess surrendered it only after the meeting in the small drawing room. Adrian turned. You knew of the meeting. The household knew Mr. Croft came. We knew Lady Maribel was with the Dowager. We knew Her Grace went in standing straight and came out with a packet in her hand. Did she weep? The question left him before pride could stop it. Mrs. Larkin's gaze lifted, and for the first time there was something like reproach in it. No, Your Grace. She did not give anyone the satisfaction. The words landed with painful accuracy. Adrian accepted them because he deserved them. The account books, he said. All of them. Some are in the Dowager Duchess's morning room, then retrieve them. Mrs. Larkin went still. Her Grace may object. Her Grace may object to me. A sound came from the corridor, small and sharp. Theodora Vale had arrived without waiting to be announced. She stood in the doorway in dark violet silk, a widow's severity sharpened by diamonds at her throat. At 60, she had not softened. Age had only refined her power, thinning away all unnecessary warmth until only command remained. Adrian, she said. You appear to have forgotten that your servants are not instruments for your temper. He faced her fully. I appear to have remembered that they are mine to question. The Dowager's eyes flicked to Mrs. Larkin and Mr. Bell. Leave us. Neither servant moved. Adrian watched his mother register the change. It was slight, but it was there, a crack in the old order. They will remain until I dismiss them, he said. Theodora's expression cooled. Do not make a spectacle of grief over a wife who has chosen melodrama. Where is Verity? You know very well she left. I asked where she is. Somewhere suitable for reflection, I imagine. Women who discover that rank does not excuse failure often require a quiet room. Mrs. Larkin's face tightened. Adrian did not look away from his mother. Failure. The Dowager lifted her chin. Do not pretend you have not thought it. 3 years of marriage. No heir, no influence worth naming. No gift for society. No instinct for the family's survival. She has always been too tender with servants too suspicious of necessary arrangements, and too proud to accept the kindness of an honorable withdrawal. Kindness is not usually delivered by a solicitor with a prepared signature. Line. Mr. Croft prepared a solution before matters became ugly. They became ugly when my wife was asked to sign away rights I did not ask her to surrender. Rights. The dowager spoke the word, as if it were a stain. A duchess has duties before she has rights. And who performed those duties after you took her keys? For the first time, Theodora did not answer at once. It was no more than a pause. Adrian felt the room notice it. Lady Maribel has been of great assistance, she said. Lady Maribel is not Duchess of Stonemere, no. But she understands the obligations of a great house better than the woman you married out of pity for her father's debts. The old wound opened in a place Adrian had not known remained tender. Verity's father had died owing money to half the county and honor to the rest. Adrian had married her because the arrangement repaired two families at once. He had told himself he had given her protection. Perhaps at first he had. Then he had mistaken protection for provision, provision for duty, and duty for enough. You will not speak of my wife as if she were an unpaid account, he said. The dowager's eyes narrowed. Your wife abandoned your house before dawn, after someone in it attempted to erase her. You are being sentimental. No, I am being late. That silenced her. Only for a heartbeat, but he saw it strike. Adrian placed the torn calling card on the desk between them. Why was Lady Maribel present when Mr. Croft gave Verity the settlement? Because Verity required a woman's guidance. She has a husband who has trusted me to manage what she could not. That trust ended this morning. Theodora's face did not change, but her hand tightened around the handle of her cane. Be careful, Adrian. A duke may command many things, but he cannot command London to forget scandal once it is fed. Then I shall begin by starving it of lies. He turned to Mr. Bell. No copy of that settlement leaves this house, the butler paled. Your Grace. Mr. Bell glanced toward the dowager. Then, with visible effort, he chose. Lady Maribel's maid was seen at the side entrance shortly after breakfast. A sealed packet was given to her. One of the hall boys heard Lady Maribel tell the coachman to go first to Curzon Street, then to Lady Aveling's. Theodora's lips parted, not in surprise, in irritation. Adrian saw it, and the final mist lifted. Lady Aveling's drawing room was not a destination. It was a trumpet. By supper, half of Mayfair would hear that the Duchess of Stonemere had fled after accepting a private settlement. By midnight, the story would have improved itself into greed, shame, and domestic disgrace. Send a rider to Curzon Street, Adrian said. Too late, Your Grace, came another voice. James stood at the corridor's edge, breathless and pale. Lady Maribel left nearly 20 minutes ago. With a sealed copy, the room held still. Adrian looked at his mother, then at the empty desk, then at the doorway through which Verity had walked, without asking him to defend her. Then we move faster, he said. Bring me my coat. Send for Sir Edmund Roth, and find my wife before London finishes inventing her guilt. By noon, the lie had already learned to travel without a carriage. It moved through Mayfair on folded calling cards, behind fans lifted at the right angle, across tea tables where women lowered their voices, not from shame but from pleasure. By 12:30, Lady Aveling's footman had carried one version to Brook Street. By 1 o'clock, a countess in Grosvenor Square had improved it. By 2, Verity Vale was no longer a duchess who had left her husband's house before dawn. She was a woman who had accepted a generous private settlement, surrendered her place without protest, and fled because pride could not bear gratitude. The story reached Bloomsbury before the afternoon light had finished fading from silver to grey. Mrs. Helena Armitage received the first card with one eyebrow raised, and the second with a look that might have frightened a weaker servant into dropping the tray. By the fourth, she ordered the front door answered only by her oldest maid, and sent the younger one to make strong tea. "London has discovered you are alive," Helena said, placing the cards on the small round table beside Verity's chair. "It seems displeased by the inconvenience." Verity sat near the window in her aunt's modest drawing-room, still wearing the grey travelling cloak she had refused to remove for nearly an hour after arriving. The room was narrow, compared with Stonemere House, its carpet faded at the centre and its curtains mended at the edges, yet it possessed one comfort the great Mayfair mansion had not offered her in months. No one in it pretended not to see her. She looked at the cards. Lady Aveling, Mrs. Pennicott, Lady Selborne. The names formed a little wall of curiosity. "They must be relieved," Verity said. "It is easier to pity a woman after deciding she has behaved badly." Helena gave a short laugh. "My dear, society can pity and condemn in the same breath. It considers this efficiency. She was her mother's sister, widowed young, and never sufficiently obedient afterward. Her black gown was plain, her cap unfashionable, and her eyes missed very little." Verity had come to her because Helena had once written, after the wedding, that no woman should live in a house where every door opened only from the outside. Verity had not understood then how literal the warning might become. "Have you eaten?" Helena asked. "I am not hungry." "That was not my question." Verity removed her gloves and folded them in her lap. Her fingers felt cold, though the fire was well kept. "I drank tea in the hired cab." "Tea from where?" "A shop near Bond Street." Helena stared. "You are a duchess of one of the oldest houses in England, and this morning you fled with shop tea in your stomach and no maid at your side." "I did not flee." The words came softly, but they did not bend. Helena's expression changed. "No, you did not." Verity looked down at the newest calling card. Across the top, in a hand she did not know, someone had penciled the words, "Poor thing." It might have been sympathy. It felt like a pin. "They will say, I took money. They are already saying it. They will say I failed him. They have been waiting to say that since your first season as his wife." Verity closed her eyes for 1 second. No longer. She had learned the danger of lingering in hurt. It could become a room of its own, and she had escaped too many rooms that morning. "Then I shall not answer them." Helena lifted the teapot. "Good, not with gossip." Helena paused. "Better." Verity reached for the small writing desk beside the window. It had belonged to Helena's late husband and smelled faintly of old paper and lavender wax. "I need paper. Good paper if you have it. And ink that does not blot." Her aunt's eyes sharpened with approval. "To whom?" "Sir Edmund Roth." The name shifted the room. Helena set down the teapot at once. "Your marriage trustee." "Yes. Does Adrian know you mean to write to him?" At the sound of Adrian's name, Verity felt the old instinct rise. Defend him. Explain him. Say he had been busy, burdened, misled, distant but not cruel. She let the instinct pass through her without obeying it. His Grace will know when Sir Edmund chooses to inform him. Helena brought the paper herself. Verity wrote without haste, because haste looked like desperation, and she would not give desperation her hand. She stated only what could stand without tears. A deed of separation had been presented to her. It contained clauses concerning household authority, separate property, charitable disbursements, and trust accounts. She had not signed. She requested immediate review of the original marriage settlement and any subsequent instrument bearing her name. She asked that Sir Edmund preserve all correspondence in which her consent was alleged. When she finished, Helena read it over her shoulder and said nothing for a long moment. "Cold enough to freeze the Thames," her aunt said at last. "Excellent." Verity sanded the page. It had to be clear. It is more than clear. It is a blade in mourning stationery. A knock sounded below, not the light rap of a maid, nor the confident blow of an unwelcome caller. This was measured, male, restrained. Helena moved to the window and angled the curtain. Her mouth tightened. A ducal carriage is in the street. Verity's hand stilled above the wax. Her heart moved once, hard enough to hurt. With the crest? Yes. Is he inside? Helena watched. Yes. The room became very quiet. Verity saw, with cruel clarity, the breakfast room at Stonemere House. Adrian opening the packet. Adrian reading her sentence. Adrian deciding whether her dignity was an inconvenience or a claim he could not ignore. She had imagined that moment a dozen times since dawn and forbidden herself to imagine it again. Yet now he was below her window, and the paper beneath her hand blurred. "Shall I refuse him?" Helena asked. Verity folded the letter with careful edges. "No." Helena turned, surprised. "No. If he has come to command me home, I should hear at once. It may cure me of several foolish hopes." The old woman's face softened, but only at the edges. "And if he has come to apologize," Verity pressed the seal into the wax. "Then he may learn that apology is not a key." The maid entered a minute later, visibly nervous. "His Grace, the Duke of Stonemere, asks whether her Grace will receive him." Verity's throat tightened around the answer. Helena came to stand beside her chair, not touching, only present. That was mercy enough. "Tell his Grace," Verity said, "that I am not receiving callers." The maid curtsied and left. Helena's eyebrows rose. "You said you would hear him." "I heard myself first." Outside, carriage wheels did not move. Verity did not go to the window. She remained seated, hands folded, while the maid returned with a sealed note on a salver. His Grace asked that this be given to her Grace only if she wished to accept it. That almost undid her. Not the note, the condition, only if she wished. Verity took it because refusing would have been another kind of conversation with him, and she was tired of being ruled by reaction. The paper was plain and sealed with the Vale signet. Her name was written in Adrian's hand. Not Duchess, not wife, Verity. She broke the seal. The note contained only 3 lines. "I will not ask you to return. I will not ask you to receive me. Tell me only how to protect what you still wish to keep." The words did not heal anything. Healing would have been too simple and far too soon. But they entered the room differently from all the other messages that day. They did not accuse. They did not instruct. They did not pretend that the wound was smaller than it was. Verity read them twice. Helena, who had never been tactful when truth would do, asked, "Well?" Verity folded the note slowly. "He has learned to knock. A beginning. Not a pardon, I did not say it was." Outside, the carriage waited another 5 minutes. Then 10. No footman came again. No demand arrived. No ducal command climbed the stairs in polished boots. At last the wheels turned and moved away through the Bloomsbury Street, leaving behind only the faint sound of iron rims on wet stone. Verity stood then, crossed to the window, and watched the carriage disappear around the corner. She did not wave. She did not weep. She returned to the desk, took up her letter to Sir Edmund, and placed Adrian's note beneath it in the locked drawer. One was evidence. The other was not yet trust. But she did not burn it. That, for the first time that day, felt like a danger of its own. The next morning, a parcel of lace arrived at Mrs. Helena Armitage's house with no card, no shop label, and a knot tied so tightly that Helena ordered the maid not to touch it. "A woman tied that," she said, turning the parcel once beneath the window light. A frightened one. Verity stood beside the writing desk, where her letter to Sir Edmund had been sealed the night before. She had slept little, though sleep was too generous a word for the hours she had spent listening to carriage wheels on the street and wondering which ones carried gossip and which carried consequences. The lace parcel lay on the table between them, wrapped in brown paper. It should have been harmless. That was why it frightened her. "Bring it here," Verity said. Helena gave her a look. "If it contains a dead mouse, I shall remind you that courage and foolishness share many relations. If it contains a dead mouse, aunt, I shall concede the point." The attempt at lightness did not reach either woman's eyes. Verity untied the string with a hairpin. Inside lay a length of old lace, yellowed but fine, folded around something stiff. When she lifted it, a sheet of paper slid onto the table. It was not a letter. It was a page torn from a ledger. Verity recognized the columns at once: date, disbursement, recipient, authorization. The numbers were neat, the hand was not. Halfway down the page, beside a line marked Servants' Pension Reserve, stood an amount transferred through Mr. Croft's office. Beside it was her name, V. Vale, authorized. Verity did not move. Helena leaned closer. "Is that yours?" "No." The room seemed to draw inward around the single word. "It is trying to be mine." Another smaller slip fell from the lace. This one held only a few lines in a hurried hand. "Your Grace, I was dismissed for asking where Mrs. Hobbs' pension had gone. Please don't think all of us believed what they said. I kept this because I thought someone should know." A. Verity touched the initial. Agnes, her former lady's maid. A quiet girl from Kent, with clever fingers, careful eyes, and a mother who depended on her wages. The dowager had dismissed her 6 weeks earlier for impertinence, though Verity had never been told what impertinence meant. Now she knew. It meant memory. It meant conscience. It meant a poor woman asking why promised money had vanished from a grand house that never lacked silver. "She is in danger," Verity said. Helena had already crossed to the bell pull. "Then we shall not invite her here through the front door like a goose asking to be plucked." Agnes came at dusk by the kitchen entrance, wearing a plain cloak and the expression of a girl who had learned to expect doors to close. She dropped a curtsy so deep it seemed almost an apology for existing. Verity rose before she finished it. "No, not tonight." Agnes froze. "Your Grace, sit by the fire." "You are shaking." "I'm all right, Your Grace, you are not. And I do not require false bravery from anyone who has already given me the truth." The words broke something in the girl's face. Not tears exactly. Relief was sometimes too exhausted to weep. Helena poured tea and placed bread and butter beside it, then turned away with deliberate tact. Agnes held the cup in both hands. "Mrs. Hobb was promised a pension after 38 years in service. When her son came to ask about it, Mr. Croft's clerk said there had been no release of funds. But I saw the ledger. It said Your Grace had authorized the transfer to Mr. Croft's office." "Yes, Your Grace." "Who showed you the ledger?" "No one." It was left in the still room after Her Grace, the Dowager, met with Mr. Croft. I know I shouldn't have looked. But Mrs. Hobb cried in the servants' hall. She thought she had been forgotten. Verity looked down at the forged initials. Anger came, clean and cold. It did not make her tremble. It steadied her. She was not forgotten. She was used. Agnes swallowed. "They said you had approved it because you thought servants grew idle if they felt too secure." Helena made a small, dangerous sound. Verity did not look away from Agnes. "I never said that. I would never say that." "I know, Your Grace." The girl's answer came quickly, too quickly. "You sent broth to my mother when she was ill. You remembered my brother's apprenticeship. I knew it wasn't you." That kindness, small when Verity had offered it, returned now with evidence folded in lace. For one sharp second, Verity had to lower her gaze. She had spent years believing her gentleness made no difference inside Stone Mere House, where power belonged to colder hands. But Agnes had remembered. Mrs. Hobb had remembered. Perhaps dignity did not always vanish when society refused to applaud it. Sometimes it waited in servants' halls, in old lace, in the courage of a dismissed maid. "Agnes," Verity said, "I need to ask you something difficult. Did anyone see you take this?" "No, but Mr. Croft's clerk came to my lodging yesterday. He said I would do well not to repeat household misunderstandings. He said poor girls can be accused of theft very easily." Helena set down her cup with care. How very original of him. Verity folded the ledger page into her writing case. "You cannot return to your lodging tonight." Agnes's eyes widened. "Your Grace, I don't want to bring trouble here. You brought truth here." Trouble was already on its way. By noon the following day, Sir Edmund Roth's office smelled of sealing wax, dust, and old decisions. Adrian sat opposite the trustee, with the original marriage settlement open between them. Sir Edmund was a spare man with white hair, gold spectacles, and a manner that suggested he had trusted documents more than people for 40 years, and had seldom regretted it. "This clause," Adrian said, tapping the page, "protects Her Grace's separate property." "It does. And this one preserves her right to review accounts attached to charitable obligations made in her name." "Correct, sir." Edmund looked over his spectacles. "Your Grace, the paper you brought from breakfast does not amend this instrument. It contradicts it." Adrian's jaw tightened. Could such a contradiction stand if she had signed? It would be contested, strongly, but I gather she did not. No, the word held more pride than he expected, and more pain. She did not. Sir Edmund lifted the ledger page. Verity had sent that morning by trusted messenger. "This authorization is not in Her Grace's hand." "You are certain?" "I handled the settlement at your marriage. Her hand has restraint. This has imitation. A copied discipline, not a natural one." Adrian heard the judgment beneath the legal observation. He had needed another man to tell him what his wife's hand looked like. "Who had access?" Sir Edmund asked. "My mother, Mr. Croft, Lady Maribel Fane. Possibly clerks. Then proceed carefully. Not slowly, carefully." The office door opened before Adrian could answer. A clerk entered, flustered, holding a card. "Sir Edmund, Her Grace, the Duchess of Stonemere, has arrived." Adrian stood at once. He did not intend to. The movement happened before calculation could discipline it. Sir Edmund watched him and said nothing. Verity appeared in the outer corridor, veiled, gloved, and composed beside Helena Armitage. She carried no visible fear. That made the distance between them worse. Adrian stepped into the corridor, stopping several feet away, far enough that no passerby could mistake restraint for intimacy or command. "Verity." She inclined her head. "Your Grace." The title was correct. It felt like a locked gate. "Agnes is safe," he said. A flicker crossed her face before she mastered it. "Where?" "With my cousin's housekeeper in Kent." No one has been told her direction except Sir Edmund and me. Verity looked at him then, fully. "Because I asked for her safety. Because you were right to ask." The corridor held their silence. Clerks bent over papers with desperate concentration. Helena inspected a framed print, as if it had offended her personally. Verity's gloved fingers tightened once around her reticule. "Thank you," she said. 2 words, formal. Earned by action, not forgiven by feeling. Adrian accepted the limit. "Mr. Croft's clerk has already been to her lodging," he said. "He will find no one there. Then he will look elsewhere." "Let him." Verity's gaze sharpened. "That sounds like a duke speaking." "It is a husband listening late." The answer unsettled her. He saw it, and because he saw it, he did not step closer. Helena turned from the print. "Verity, Sir Edmund is ready." Verity gave Adrian one last look, not soft, not cold, but measuring. "Then we should not keep truth waiting." She entered the office. Adrian remained in the corridor until the door closed. Only then did he notice the footman approaching from the stair, with a note in Lady Maribel's scented hand. The message was brief and poisonous. If her grace wishes to correct unfortunate whispers, she may attend Lady Maribel's charity musicale tomorrow evening. Otherwise, London will be left with the document bearing her own confession. Adrian folded the note once. In the office beyond the door, Verity was speaking clearly, placing fact after fact before Sir Edmund. He heard her voice and understood that the next blow had already been chosen. This time, London would not merely whisper. It would be invited to watch. Lady Maribel Fane's charity musicale began with Mozart, candlelight, and the soft violence of every eye in the room, pretending not to stare. Her townhouse in Curzon Street had been arranged for benevolence with almost theatrical care. A harp stood near the pianoforte. White lilies filled porcelain vases. A table at the far end displayed ribbons for donations to widows of retired officers, though Verity noticed that no widow had been invited to disturb the elegance of the cause. The audience shimmered in silk and jewels beneath the chandeliers, speaking in low voices that quieted by several degrees when she entered. She had come in grey again, not the grey of retreat, but the grey of steel under rain. Helena Armitage walked beside her in plain black, chin lifted, daring anyone to mistake simplicity for weakness. For one suspended moment, the room did what society always did when it could not decide whether to condemn openly or politely. It smiled, then it breathed, then it began. "Your Grace," Lady Maribel said, crossing the room with both hands extended, as if they had been dear friends parted by illness, rather than adversaries meeting over a loaded table. She wore rose silk, too young in color, too triumphant in cut, and her diamonds flashed each time she tilted her head. "How brave of you to come." Verity accepted the greeting without taking both hands. One was enough. "How charitable of you to invite me." Maribel's smile trembled at the edge, but only for an instant. "I couldn't imagine the evening without you." After all, no one understands widowhood and provision better than a duchess, who has taken such personal interest in settlements. The nearest cluster of women fell silent with practiced surprise. A gentleman near the mantel coughed into his glove. Helena's gaze moved over the room like a blade selecting thread. Verity did not look away from Maribel. "I have always believed provision should reach the people for whom it was intended." The words were mild. Maribel heard the warning inside them. Her lashes lowered. "Then we are agreed." How comforting music rescued the room for exactly 9 minutes. A soprano sang of fidelity in Italian, while half the ladies present watched Verity over their fans. She sat in the second row, not hidden, not central, Helena at her right, an empty chair at her left. That empty chair soon gained meaning. Every time the door opened, someone glanced toward it, expecting Adrian. Verity did not. She had spent the previous night deciding she would not measure her courage by whether he arrived in time to lend it weight. If the blow came, she would stand beneath it with her own spine. When the song ended, polite applause rose and fell. Lady Maribel stepped forward with a paper in her hand. Not the settlement itself, not yet. A list of donors. Her voice was sweet enough to ice the teeth. "Before the next performance, I must thank all those whose generosity allows vulnerable women to live with dignity when circumstances alter beyond repair." A ripple of appreciation passed through the room. Some sacrifices, of course, are more private than others. Some ladies choose quiet arrangements rather than public bitterness. We must honor such discretion. Verity felt Helena's hand settle lightly over her own. A restraint, not a warning. Across the room, a matron in violet whispered too loudly. Surely she will not mention it. That was the purpose of the whisper. Maribel turned a page. "I have also received, quite unexpectedly, an example of a private settlement made in the most generous spirit. It reminded me how gracefully a woman may withdraw when the preservation of a great house requires it. The air changed. It tightened first around Verity's throat, then around the room. A folded copy appeared in Maribel's hand, as if conjured from lace and malice. She did not read from it. She only allowed the top page to be seen by Lady Aveling, who sat closest. Lady Aveling's eyes widened with the pleasure of being horrified. "Good heavens," she whispered. "Is that truly the Duchess's own agreement?" Verity stood, not quickly, not dramatically. That would have given them the scene they wanted. She rose as if called upon in a drawing-room discussion. Her face composed, her hands still. "Lady Maribel," she said, "if you possess a document bearing my name, I should be grateful to know from whom you received it." Maribel turned with innocent alarm. "My dear Verity, don't distress yourself. No one means to accuse you of anything. Then no one will mind answering." A low murmur moved across the room. Mr. Croft stood near the doorway, half concealed behind two gentlemen and a potted palm. Verity saw him because guilt often mistook shadow for shelter. His eyes flicked once toward Maribel. "The paper was sent in confidence," Maribel said. "So was my marriage settlement, yet here we are." The murmur sharpened. Someone drew in a breath. Lady Aveling lifted the copied page before Maribel could stop her. "It says Her Grace accepted an allowance and agreed to withdraw from domestic claims." "Does it?" Verity asked. "How curious." A woman behind her whispered, "Curious." Another said, "Shameless." Then a sharper voice, one Verity did not know, cut through the silk and candlelight. "Did your Grace sell the title, or only the marriage?" The words landed with a small collective gasp. Helena rose at once. "You will withdraw that?" Verity touched her aunt's arm. "No." The room stilled. She turned toward the speaker, a young married woman whose courage had come borrowed from the crowd. "No title in England can be sold by a wife over a tea table, madam. As for my marriage, I was unaware it had been placed at auction." A few faces changed, not softened, not yet, but attention shifted. Maribel's smile thinned. "You do yourself no kindness by turning this into a display. I did not bring the document. But you did leave your husband's house." Yes, that single word struck harder than any denial. Verity let it stand. "I left after being asked to sign away duties, rights, and accounts I had never been consulted upon surrendering." Lady Aveling looked again at the page. "But this says you consented. Then it lies." Silence. True silence, not the polite version. Mr. Croft stepped forward, wearing professional sorrow like a black coat. "Your Grace, please." "It's unwise to speak so rashly in company." "Mr. Croft," Verity said, "you were present when I refused to sign." The solicitor's face lost color, then recovered it too smoothly. "You were understandably distressed. You may not recall the sequence of events with perfect clarity." Helena made a sound of contempt. Maribel seized the opening. "No one blames you for distress." "Truly we don't. A woman in your position must feel terribly cornered." "My position," Verity said, "is Duchess of Stonemere. It has become inconvenient to several people, but it has not changed." The door opened. This time the room did not pretend not to notice. Adrian entered without haste, but the effect was immediate. Conversations died as if a hand had closed around the room. He wore dark mourning dress, perfectly cut, his face controlled in the manner that had made ministers wary and ambitious mothers hopeful. Yet his eyes went first to Verity, not to Maribel, not to Croft, not to the paper, to Verity. He crossed the room and stopped at her side, close enough to stand with her, not close enough to claim she needed support. "Lady Maribel," he said, "you have in your hand a private document concerning my house." Maribel curtsied. "Your Grace, I only wish to prevent misunderstanding." Then you chose a remarkable method. A few gentlemen looked down to hide expressions better suited to clubs than drawing rooms. Adrian held out his hand. "The paper." Maribel hesitated. That hesitation was the first public mistake she had made all evening. Adrian did not repeat himself. Lady Aveling surrendered the copy instead, eager to be helpful now that danger had changed direction. Adrian read the first page, then the second. His expression did not alter. This is not an authentic settlement. The words moved through the room like a match touched to dry silk. Verity's breath caught despite herself. Authentic. Not forged, not false. A careful word. A safe word. The word of a man, standing at the edge of truth and measuring the fall. Mr. Croft stepped in quickly. Your Grace is correct that the document remains incomplete. Certain formalities were not concluded. Adrian turned his head. You will not explain my wife's consent in public, Mr. Croft. You do not possess it. The solicitor bowed. Of course, Your Grace. Maribel's lips parted. The Dowager was not present, but Verity felt her design in every corner of the room. Force the scandal open. Make Adrian contain it. Let society hear just enough to suspect Verity, never enough to condemn the true hand behind it. Adrian folded the copy once and held it at his side. No one in this room is to repeat that Her Grace accepted any such arrangement. She did not. A murmur rose, uncertain now. Some disappointment, some alarm, some recalculation. Lady Aveling managed a pale smile. Then London will be relieved to know the matter is merely a misunderstanding. Verity looked at Adrian. Is that what it is? His gaze met hers. In it she saw anger, regret, and the old reflex of a duke trained to keep ruin behind closed doors until it could be buried with dignity. Not merely, he said, but not for this room. There it was. Protection and concealment, both wearing the same coat. Verity felt the ache of it, sharper because part of her had wanted so badly to be wrong. She inclined her head to the room, to Maribel, to the women who had nearly watched her social death while pretending to support widows. Then she turned to Adrian. Her voice was low enough that only those nearest could hear, which meant half of Mayfair would know it by morning. Tonight, you protected your name, not mine. His face changed just once before discipline returned. Verity took Helena's arm and walked out before anyone could decide whether she had fled or triumphed. This time she knew the answer. By the time Verity reached Helena Armitage's carriage, the copy of the settlement had already become heavier in Adrian's hand than any parliamentary bill he had ever carried. It was only paper, folded once, warmed by the drawing room where it had nearly destroyed his wife. Yet as he stepped into the cold air outside Lady Maribel's townhouse, he understood that paper could be a blade if society agreed to call it truth. Verity was at the carriage door, one gloved hand on Helena's arm, her face pale beneath the veil she had lowered only after leaving the room. She had not hurried. That had been the worst of it. A woman who fled looked afraid. A woman who walked away calmly gave the watching world something far more dangerous to discuss. Verity, he said. She paused, but she did not turn at once. The footman held the carriage door open. Candlelight from the townhouse spilled down the steps behind Adrian, carrying music, whispers, and the restless shifting of guests who had discovered that charity was less entertaining than scandal when scandal had a Duchess at its center. Helena looked back first. Your Grace, if you have come to explain that the room was not suitable for truth, I advise you to save your breath. London has always found room for lies. Adrian accepted the rebuke because it was deserved. I came to speak to my wife. Verity turned then. Her veil softened her features without hiding the steadiness in her eyes. Your wife was available for speech before tonight. You may have noticed her most clearly once others began speaking of her. The words were quiet. They cut cleanly. I noticed too late, he said. That does not alter what must be done now. And what must be done now? I need a few days. Something in her face closed. Not anger, worse, recognition. A few days for what? To gather proof strong enough that no one can dismiss this as domestic quarrel or female distress. Sir Edmund has the original settlement. The ledgers must be traced. Croft must be forced into contradiction. Lady Maribel must be separated from my mother's protection. If I call this forged tonight without enough foundation, my mother will turn the accusation into a son's public temper and a wife's private resentment. And while you prepare the perfect battlefield, Verity asked, "What shall I be in London?" He had no answer fast enough. She stepped down from the carriage step and faced him fully on the pavement. A gust of cold air stirred her veil against her cheek. Shall I be greedy for 3 days? Unstable for 4? Ungrateful until Thursday? How much time does your strategy require me to spend under a name I did not earn? I am trying to protect you. No, her voice did not rise, and because of that, the word carried farther. You are trying to make the truth safe for the House of Vale before you make it safe for me. Adrian felt that strike where pride had no defense. Behind him, a gentleman leaving the music-hall slowed, then thought better of being seen listening and moved on. If I mishandle this, it will touch everything. The estate, the servants, the charities, your own settlement, your future security. My future security was nearly signed away in your house by people who spoke in your name. I know. Do you? Her composure faltered for the first time. Not into tears, but into something more intimate. Weariness. Do you know what it is to stand in a room while women decide whether you sold your marriage? Do you know what it is to hear a man who should know your handwriting call a forged document merely inauthentic? He looked down at the copy in his hand. I should have said more. Yes, I will when? His silence answered before he did. Verity gave a small nod as though some final account had balanced. Then I shall not return to Stonemere House. The sentence was simple. Adrian felt the world narrow around it. No one has asked you to return before you wish it. That is not what I mean. I shall not return as a wife kept out of sight while her husband decides when her dignity becomes convenient to defend. I will not be loved privately and shamed publicly. The word loved came and went so swiftly that he almost wondered whether he had imagined it. But her eyes told him she had not. She had given it to him not as a confession, but as a test he was failing. Verity, he said, and for one dangerous second his voice lost its ducal discipline. I do not want you shamed anywhere. Then name the shame correctly. Helena touched Verity's elbow. My dear, the air is bitter. Verity did not move. Adrian stepped closer, then stopped himself when her gaze warned him that proximity was not permission. He had commanded rooms all his life. He had forgotten that trust could not be summoned into one. Give me until the family council, he said. There need not be a scandal larger than that. Verity's mouth softened in pain. A family council, so the same house that made me small may decide whether I was wrong to object. I will preside, and your mother will attend. Yes, and Mr. Croft. Yes, and Lady Maribel. If she has any courage left after tonight, she will be made to answer. Verity looked toward the lit windows of the townhouse, where silhouettes moved behind curtains like figures in a theater. Answering is not the same as being believed. I can make them listen. Can you make yourself speak? That was the question that followed him back to Stonemere House. His mother was waiting in the morning room, though midnight had passed, as if time, like servants, ought to obey her convenience. The fire burned high. The Dowager Duchess wore black silk and diamonds, not because she had gone out, but because she understood armor. On the table beside her lay 3 opened notes, each carrying the swift handwriting of women who had attended the music-hall. London had already begun reporting itself. You made a scene, she said. Lady Maribel made the scene, Mr. Croft supplied the prop. Do not be vulgar. Adrian placed the copied settlement on the table. Explain this. Theodora did not look at it. It is an incomplete instrument meant to resolve an unfortunate domestic impasse. It bears clauses I did not authorize. You authorized me to manage the household, not to remove its Duchess. She removed herself. Publicly now, with assistance from that widowed aunt, who has always enjoyed grievance more than respectability. Adrian's hand tightened once, then released. You will not speak of Helena Armitage again. His mother's eyes narrowed. This is what sentiment does. It makes a man confuse defiance for virtue. Your father did the same. The room changed. She had chosen the old weapon because sharper ones had failed. Adrian's father had not died in a duel, nor in disgrace formally recorded. He had died after a financial scandal that began as rumor, became public ridicule, and emptied half the respect from the Vale name before illness finished what shame had started. Adrian had been 21. His mother had buried grief beneath control and taught her son that scandal was not survived by truth, but contained by silence. You remember what happened when your father allowed enemies to name the story first, she said. You spent years repairing this house. Do not burn it down for a woman who has given it no air and no peace. The words reached the place she intended. Adrian hated that they did. He saw again creditors in the hall, whispers at doors, his mother's white face over account books, the family crest treated like a damaged coin. A duke could be ruined without losing title if everyone agreed to laugh when he entered a room. Theodora leaned in. Investigate quietly. Correct quietly. Provide for her quietly if you must. But do not accuse your mother, your solicitor, and a lady of good family before witnesses, unless you are prepared to feed London for a year. Adrian looked at the settlement copy. Verity's voice returned. Can you make yourself speak? There will be a council, he said, private. Theodora's expression eased by a fraction. It was enough to tell him she had heard retreat. Good. That is wisdom. No, it was fear dressed in wisdom. He knew it even as he chose it. By dawn, Verity knew it too. Adrian's note arrived at Helena's house before breakfast, requesting several days for a private inquiry and promising that no demand would be made upon her. He had written carefully, too carefully. Verity read it once beside the window, then placed it on the desk without folding it. Helena watched from across the room. That is not nothing. No, Verity said. It is not enough. She opened her writing case and withdrew the original ledger page, the note from Agnes, and the copy of her letter to Sir Edmund. Her hand rested for a moment on the locked drawer where Adrian's first note lay hidden beneath formal papers. She had not burned that one. This one she did not keep. She turned it face down. Aunt, I need your maid to carry a sealed packet to Sir Edmund Roth, not by the usual street, and not in livery. Helena rose at once. What shall it contain? Verity took up a clean sheet and wrote one line before adding the evidence. If His Grace will not name the truth, the documents must. She sealed the packet with plain wax, not the stone-mere seal. It shall contain the beginning of my answer. Sir Edmund Roth did not like dramatic conclusions, which made his certainty all the more frightening. He sat behind his desk the morning after Verity's sealed packet arrived, the curtains drawn. Against a thin London rain, 3 papers arranged beneath a brass lamp. Verity's true signature from the marriage settlement, the copied settlement from Lady Maribel's musicale, and the ledger page. Agnes had hidden inside the lace. Adrian stood at the other side of the desk, with his hands clasped behind his back, while Sir Edmund adjusted his spectacles and studied the lines as if listening to them speak. This is not a hurried forgery, the trustee said at last. That would almost be less troubling. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Explain. A hurried hand betrays panic. This betrays practice. Sir Edmund placed one finger near the false initials. Observe the V. Her Grace begins with downward control and releases pressure at the turn. The imitation presses too heavily at the beginning because the writer knows the shape but not the habit. It is a copied gesture, not a lived one. Adrian looked at the ink until the letters blurred. Who would have had cause to practice my wife's hand? Someone invited to handle her notes, invitations, household lists, or calling correspondence. The answer entered the room with Lady Maribel's, perfume still clinging to it. Adrian remembered her at Stonemere House, laughing near Verity's tea table, offering to relieve her Grace of tedious writing, bending over invitation cards in the morning room while his mother praised her efficiency. He had thought it harmless. He had thought many things harmless because he had not been the one diminished by them. Lady Maribel, he said. Sir Edmund did not disagree. Perhaps, or someone using samples provided by her. We must avoid certainty where proof is still assembling itself. My mother will hide behind that distinction. Your mother has survived decades of society because she understands distinctions better than most solicitors. Sir Edmund lifted the ledger page. But this is harder for her. The pension transfer bears the same false discipline. The copied settlement bears an additional witness signature that does not appear on the paper Her Grace left for you. Someone altered the copy after she refused. Adrian's voice lowered. Croft, very likely. But likely is not enough if he chooses dignity and denial. The office door opened after a soft knock, and the senior clerk entered with a small notebook. Forgive me, Sir Edmund. His Grace asked that I send for the date book from Mr. Croft's office. His clerk would not surrender it, but he did allow me to inspect entries from the previous fortnight. Adrian turned. And the clerk looked uneasy. Mr. Croft stated yesterday that the settlement was drafted after Her Grace requested a private arrangement. But the first appointment concerning a separation instrument is entered 5 days before Her Grace was summoned to the drawing-room. A stillness settled. Sir Edmund removed his spectacles. In whose name? Her Grace the Dowager Duchess. Adrian felt the last convenient explanation die. Not quickly, not mercifully. It left behind the shape of a deliberate plan. Did Croft know you saw it? He returned while I was there, Your Grace. He said I had misunderstood a routine domestic note. Did he? Adrian asked. Then he followed me to the stairs and said clerks who repeat confusion sometimes lose position. Sir Edmund's mouth tightened, a poor threat. But revealing. Adrian took the notebook from the clerk and read the copied date twice. 5 days before Verity had been asked to sign. 5 days before she had been offered so-called kindness. 5 days before his mother had looked a Duchess in the face and pretended obedience would spare her pain. Send a note to my man at Kent, Adrian said. Agnes is not to be moved without my direct instruction. No visitor is to be admitted to her. No letter reaches her unless Sir Edmund or I have seen it first. The clerk bowed and withdrew. Sir Edmund watched Adrian for a moment. You protect the maid because the Duchess asked it. Yes, that is wise. It is late. The older man did not soften the truth. Yes, Your Grace. But lateness and uselessness are not the same condition. Adrian looked at Verity's real signature, firm, restrained, alive in a way the copies were not. My wife must be told, by you, only if she allows it. The words cost less than they would have a week ago, but more than pride wished to admit. Sir Edmund nodded. Then ask properly at Helena. Armitage's house in Bloomsbury, Verity received Adrian's note just before dusk. After a day spent refusing 3 callers and 1 basket of flowers from Lady Aveling that contained no apology and 2 many white roses. Helena had ordered the flowers sent to the kitchen steps for anyone who wanted them. Contrition should not smell that expensive, she had said. Verity sat by the fire when the note arrived, her writing case open, Agnes's first message resting beneath a paperweight. The maid who brought it looked as if she feared the paper might detonate. His Grace waits below, Your Grace. He says he won't come up unless you wish it. Verity's hand paused. Helena looked over the rim of her teacup. Improvement. He has progressed from knocking to remaining downstairs. Verity opened the note. It was short, like the first, but the hand was less rigid. Sir Edmund has found evidence that the hand on the false papers was practiced from samples of yours. Mr. Croft appears to have begun the instrument before you were ever asked. Agnes remains safe in Kent. I ask permission to place discreet protection near this house, not to watch you, but to prevent others from reaching you through fear. If you refuse, I will honor it. Verity read the final line again. If you refuse, I will honor it. A week earlier, such a sentence from Adrian would have seemed impossible. Not because he was cruel, but because he had lived so long inside command that permission had become a foreign country. Helena set down her cup. Well, he asks to put men near the house. That sounds unpleasantly ducal, he asks. Helena's expression altered by a fraction. That sounds inconveniently decent. Verity rose and crossed to the window. The street below was damp and dim. Adrian stood beside his carriage, hat in hand despite the cold, speaking to no one. He did not look up at her window, though he must have known which one it was. That restraint touched her more sharply than any plea could have done. She despised that it mattered. She despised more that it was beginning to matter for reasons she could respect. Aunt, she said, if I permit it, am I accepting his protection? My dear, accepting a locked gate does not mean accepting the man who built the wall too late. Verity almost smiled. Almost. She turned back to the desk and wrote her answer on plain paper. His Grace may place 2 men, no more, and they are to answer to Mrs. Armitage's household rules while on this street. They are not to report my movements unless there is danger. They are not to interfere with my visitors. They are not to treat me as cargo recovered from loss. She sanded the paper and folded it. Helena read it and gave a satisfied nod. There, a Duchess's consent with teeth. The maid carried the note down. Verity remained at the window this time. Adrian read her answer under the carriage lamp. For the first time since the breakfast room, his face changed in public. Not much. Only enough to show the words had struck somewhere human. He bowed toward the house, not to the window, as if refusing to presume she watched. Then he gave instructions to his coachman and left 2 plain-dressed men at opposite ends of the street. They did not loiter like spies. They stood like warning posts. That night, the second roomer arrived before supper. Lady Selborne's nephew's wife had heard from Lady Aveling that the Duchess of Stonemere was not in full possession of her nerves. By the time Helen's maid heard it from a baker's boy, Verity had become a wife under the influence of a bitter aunt, a woman too delicate to understand her own papers, perhaps too unsettled to be contradicted. Helena laughed once when told, but her eyes were hard. Ah, they have failed to make you greedy, so now they shall try to make you mad. Verity folded her hands in her lap. The insult should have chilled her. Instead, it clarified the room. Then they are frightened. Yes, Helena said, and frightened people make mistakes. A message from Sir Edmund arrived the next morning, carried by his own clerk and sealed twice. Verity opened it with Helena beside her. The words were formal, but the meaning was not. A family council would be held at Stonemere House in 2 days to examine the disputed papers, the altered accounts, and the question of authorization. Her presence was requested, not required. Sir Edmund would attend. Adrian would preside. Verity reached the final line and went still. Helena leaned closer. What is it? Verity handed her the letter. Her aunt read aloud, her voice sharpening with each name. The Dowager Duchess has also invited several suitable witnesses, including Lady Aveling, the Honourable Mrs. Pennicott, and the wife of the Bishop of Southwark, in order that her Grace's interests may be protected before respectable observers. Helena lowered the page. Respectable observers. How considerate. Verity looked toward the locked drawer where Adrian's first note lay, then toward the newest one still on her desk. Protection, permission, truth, trap. All of them had begun to share the same room. No, she said quietly. Not considerate. She took the letter back and folded it once. Strategic. Stonemere House received Verity 2 days later, as though the walls themselves had been instructed to remember their manners. The front steps had been scrubbed, the brass polished, the footmen arranged in faultless lines. Nothing in the hall suggested that this house had watched its Duchess leave before dawn, without crest or maid. That, Verity thought as Helena Armitage stepped down beside her, was the genius of great houses. They could swallow a woman's pain and still smell of beeswax. Mr. Bell opened the door himself. He bowed lower than propriety required, not enough to create scandal, but enough for Verity to understand that the household had noticed the difference between absence and return. Your Grace, she inclined her head. Mr. Bell. His eyes flicked once toward the staircase. His Grace awaits you in the breakfast room. Not the drawing room, not the library, the breakfast room. A room could become a witness if people were forced to meet the truth where the lie had first been left. Verity removed her gloves slowly in the hall. Her hands did not shake. Helena's did, but with temper rather than fear. Remember, her aunt murmured, a trap is only a trap if one forgets where the door is. I have not forgotten. They were shown in without delay. The room had been altered since the morning of Verity's departure. The long table remained, but the places had been arranged not for a meal, but for judgment. Adrian stood at the head, dark and still, his face unreadable until his eyes found hers. Then something in him changed. It was not relief. Relief would have assumed too much. It was recognition stripped of command. To his right sat Sir Edmund Roth with his papers ordered in severe piles. Near him were Mrs. Larkin, pale but composed, and Miss Bell standing behind a chair rather than taking one. Across from them sat Theodora Vale, Dowager Duchess of Stonemere, gloved hands folded over the ivory head of her cane. Lady Maribel Fane occupied a seat near the windows, dressed in soft lavender, as though innocence had a shade. Mr. Croft sat beside her, his folio closed, his expression professionally wounded. 3 invited witnesses completed the circle. Lady Aveling, the Honourable Mrs. Pennicott, and the Bishop of Southwark's wife, Mrs. Harbury, whose very presence had been selected, had to make cruelty look respectable. Every eye turned when Verity entered. No one spoke. Adrian moved first. He did not cross to her. He drew back the chair at his left, the Duchess's place, and waited. Verity felt the room notice. She also felt Theodora's displeasure like cold air from a cellar. She walked to the chair and sat. Helena took the seat just behind her, not at the table, but near enough to remind everyone that Verity had not come unaccompanied by loyalty. Adrian sat only after she did. This council has been called, he said, to examine certain papers presented to Her Grace, certain rumours spread afterward, and certain accounts altered under her name. Theodora's brows lifted. A grave description for a domestic misunderstanding. That description is deliberate. Mr. Croft opened his folio at last. Your Grace, before matters proceed in a manner that may injure all involved, perhaps, I may clarify that the instrument in question was never meant as an accusation. It was a private arrangement prepared in anticipation of Her Grace's consent. Before I gave it, Verity said. The room turned to her. Her voice had not risen. That made it harder to dismiss. Croft arranged his face into sympathy. Your Grace, you were distressed. It would be understandable if memory has arranged events to spare your feelings. Adrian's hand tightened against the table. Verity answered before he could. My feelings do not keep accounts, Mr. Croft. Ink does. Sir Edmund placed the copied settlement on the table. This is the version circulated after Lady Maribel's music hale. It contains a witness signature absent from the paper Her Grace left at Stonemere House. Lady Aveling leaned forward despite herself. Theodora did not move. Copies are often completed at different stages, Croft said. That is not extraordinary. Sir Edmund lifted another document. The date book from your office records. Discussion of a separation instrument 5 days before Her Grace was approached. A clerical ambiguity. It names the Dowager Duchess. The first fracture passed through the room. It was small, almost inaudible, but it moved from face to face. Mrs. Pennicott glanced toward Theodora. Mrs. Harbury's mouth tightened. Maribel looked down at her lap. Theodora smiled faintly. I sought advice. A mother may seek advice when her son's household is strained. A duchess may also be informed before her household is dismantled, Verity said. The dowager's gaze moved to her slowly. You were never denied dignity. Verity let the silence hold for one beat. I was offered money to abandon it. Maribel gave a little gasp. That's unfair. No one wanted you abandoned. No. Verity turned to her. You poured tea at my table. You answered invitations addressed to me. You sat with Mr. Croft while I was asked to sign a document you claim was private. What word would you prefer? Colour rose along Maribel's throat. I was helping Her Grace the Dowager. You always seemed so tired. Yes, Verity said. Being erased is tiring. The sentence settled over the room with such force that even Lady Aveling lowered her eyes. Croft recovered first. This is precisely why private settlement was advisable. Her Grace is naturally sensitive. The situation has encouraged unfortunate interpretations. By whom? Verity asked. He blinked. I beg your pardon. Who interpreted my refusal as consent? Who interpreted my silence as agreement? Who interpreted my name as available for use? Croft's lips pressed together. Your Grace is making rhetoric of a legal question. Then answer legally. Sir Edmund moved the ledger page forward. This pension transfer bears Her Grace's initials. She denies writing them. I agree that the hand is imitative. Imitative is not proof, Croft said. No, Sir Edmund replied. But patterns are instructive. He placed the copied settlement beside the ledger. The same unnatural pressure appears in both. Adrian looked at Croft. You told me the instrument followed my wife's request. I said it was prepared to meet a domestic necessity. That is not. Same thing. Your Grace, don't let emotion cloud the family interest. The moment the words left his mouth, Croft knew he had erred. Adrian's face went still in a way Verity remembered from the music hale, except this time the restraint seemed turned outward, not inward. You will address Her Grace as Duchess. You will not reduce her objection to emotion again, Croft bowed. Of course, Your Grace. Theodora tapped one gloved finger against her cane. How gallant. But gallantry does not answer the essential fact. Verity left this house. She created the impression of rupture, then allowed that impression to grow. If society misunderstood, perhaps it did so because she chose drama over trust. Verity looked at the older woman and saw, beneath the steel, calculation still working. The dowager had not come merely to deny. She had come to reposition blame until every witness could leave with a version that sounded reasonable enough to repeat. Verity touched the edge of the table. If I signed the settlement, she asked, why was the only paper His Grace received left unsigned on his plate? The question entered the room and locked every door behind it. Lady Aveling's fan stopped. Mrs. Pennicott looked directly at Croft. Mrs. Harbury's brows drew together. Theodora's expression did not change, but Maribel's did. A flicker, a breath, a tiny betrayal of panic. Croft opened his mouth, then closed it. An unsigned paper, Verity continued, was in his Grace's possession before this witnessed copy appeared in Lady Maribel's drawing room. The unsigned paper was the one I handled. The witnessed copy was not. Sir Edmund nodded once. That is correct. Adrian looked at Croft. Explain the witness signature. Croft's voice regained polish by force. It may have been added in anticipation of completion. By whom? A clerk, perhaps. Name him. Croft hesitated. Maribel's gloved hands clenched together in her lap. Theodora turned her head toward her, a warning too swift for most people to notice. Verity noticed. So did Adrian. Lady Maribel, he said. Her eyes flew to him. Your Grace? Did you copy any of my wife's handwriting while assisting my mother? Invitations, Maribel said quickly. Only invitations. Her Grace the Dowager said Verity was tired, and I wanted to be useful. Did you practice her name? No, the answer came too fast. Sir Edmund removed a blank sheet from his case and placed it before her. Then he set down a pen. Then you will not object to writing it now, Maribel stared at the paper. The room seemed to lean toward her. Theodora's cane struck the floor once, not loudly, but with command. This is an insult. Sir Edmund looked at the Dowager over his spectacles. No, Your Grace. It is an opportunity to remove suspicion. Adrian's gaze stayed on Maribel. Write the name. Maribel looked at Verity. For one brief moment, all her rose silk, lavender innocence, and practiced sweetness failed her. What remained was not triumph. It was fear of losing a place she had nearly stolen. Verity did not pity her, but she understood, and understanding made the room sadder than simple hatred would have done. Slowly, Maribel took the pen. The scratch of the nib on paper sounded louder than the clock. She wrote, Verity Vale. The V began too heavily. The turn released too late. Sir Edmund looked down. Adrian did not need him to speak. Neither did Verity. The room had seen enough to become dangerous. Then, Theodora rose, her black silk whispering like a curtain drawn over a window. This farce has gone on long enough. Her eyes fixed on Verity. A great house requires more than wounded pride. It requires an air, steadiness, and a wife who understands sacrifice. Adrian stood. Mother. Verity lifted one hand, stopping him without looking away from the Dowager. No, let her finish. It is useful when cruelty forgets to be polite. The breakfast room seemed to shrink around Theodora Vale's standing figure, as if the great house itself had leaned in to hear how far its old mistress would go. For years, Verity had believed cruelty became easier to bear when wrapped in refinement. That was not true. It only made the wound harder to name before witnesses. The Dowager Duchess looked down the table at her with the composed disgust of a woman correcting a flaw in silver. You ask why the House of Vale sought a quiet arrangement, she said. Very well. I shall answer what others are too delicate to say. A duchess has one duty no charity ledger, no sentimental affection for servants, no injured pride can replace. She must secure the succession. 3 years have passed. There is no child. There is no promise of one. Yet you cling to keys, accounts, and precedents as if stubbornness could produce an heir. The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with everything no one had been willing to say aloud. Lady Aveling lowered her fan slowly. Mrs. Pennicott stared at the table. Mrs. Harbury, the bishop's wife, looked toward Verity with distress that came too late to protect anyone. Maribel's face had gone pale above her lavender gown. Mr. Croft, sensing the room tilt away from documents and into the safer ugliness of womanly failure, arranged his expression into grave sympathy. Adrian's chair scraped back. Mother, you will stop now. Verity lifted her hand again, not high, only enough to halt him. To her surprise, he stopped. That obedience, small and immediate, steadied her more than his anger could have done. She did not look at him. She kept her gaze on Theodora. No. Let her grace finish the argument. She built the settlement to avoid saying plainly. Theodora's eyes hardened. Do not pretend courage where there is only embarrassment. I am not embarrassed. The words came quietly. Verity felt them settle inside her before the room received them. I have been lonely. I have been dismissed. I have been spoken around in rooms where I had every right to speak. I have been pitied by women who wanted my chair and corrected by people who used my silence as proof that I agreed. But I am not embarrassed because my worth cannot be measured by an empty cradle. A breath moved through the witnesses. Adrian's hand closed over the back of his chair. The movement was slight, but Verity knew he had heard the part she had never said to him. Empty cradle, the nursery passage, the blue room. The way a house could place a woman near the symbol of what she had not given and call it convenience. Theodora's mouth tightened. A beautiful sentiment. It will not preserve a dukedom. No, Verity said. Hoss will not preserve it either. Mr. Croft sat forward. Your Grace, we are wandering from the matter at hand. We are finally arriving at it. Verity turned to Sir Edmund. The handwriting is similar, but not enough to condemn Lady Maribel alone. Is that correct? Sir Edmund nodded once. Correct. It suggests practice. It does not prove she completed the legal instrument. Maribel exhaled too quickly. Verity looked at her. You may breathe, Lady Maribel. I do not require you to be guiltier than you are. The words struck more cleanly than accusation. Maribel's eyes shone with humiliation. I only helped with invitations. Her Grace the Dowager said you were tired of correspondence. I was tired, Verity replied, not absent. Adrian spoke then, his voice low. Did my mother give you samples of the Duchess's hand? Maribel's gaze flew to Theodora. The older woman's stillness became its own warning. I don't remember every paper, Maribel said. There were cards, notes, household lists. It all seemed harmless. Harmless, Verity repeated. The favored word of people who are not harmed. The room had begun to change. Verity could feel it. No one had vindicated her. No one had apologized. But certainty was leaving the witnesses in small, visible withdrawals. Lady Aveling no longer looked delighted. Mrs. Pennicott looked frightened of having carried the wrong story. Mrs. Harbury watched Theodora now. Not Verity. That was something. Not justice. A beginning. Theodora saw it too. Her cane touched the carpet once. Enough. If Verity wishes to perform dignity before guests, let her. The facts remain unchanged. She abandoned this house. Adrian's voice cut in. After being presented with a document I did not authorize. Because you refused to see necessity until it came to this. Necessity for whom? He asked. Theodora looked at him then, and for the first time that morning, Verity saw not certainty but fury wounded by betrayal. For you, for the family. For the name your father nearly dragged into mud. I kept this house standing when you were too young to know what ruin sounded like in the hall. I will not apologize for recognizing weakness before it ruins us again. Adrian went still. The old wound had found him. Verity saw it pass through his face, controlled but not hidden. His father, the scandal. The lesson that silence preserved what truth could not. For one dangerous instant, she thought he might retreat into that old training. Then his eyes moved to her. Not pleading, not certain. Listening, Verity stood. The witnesses stirred, startled by the finality of it. Then we are finished for today. Theodora's brows lifted. Are we? Yes. I did not come to beg a place in a house that requires my erasure as proof of loyalty. She looked toward Maribel. I did not come to ruin you for practicing my name when you were praised for making yourself useful. You will answer for what you did when truth reaches you fully. Maribel bowed her head, a small, broken motion. Verity turned to Mr. Croft. And you, sir, will discover that a woman who refuses to sign is not the same as a woman who cannot read. His polished face stiffened. Then she looked at Adrian. This was the hardest part. Not because he had failed her. Because he had begun, slowly and painfully, to stop failing, and that made departure feel less like escape, and more like a choice she had to make while her heart still knew his name. Your Grace, she said. The title made him flinch almost imperceptibly. There is a packet for you, Mrs. Armitage will place it in your hand when I have left. Verity, he said it softly, with no command in it. Do not ask me to trust a truth you are still afraid to speak. No one moved. No one even rustled silk. Verity inclined her head to the witnesses, then stepped away from the Duchess's chair. Adrian stood fully. Every gentleman and lady in the room followed, because he gave them no alternative. The scrape of chairs became the first public acknowledgement of rank that had not been arranged against her. Verity accepted it without triumph. At the door she paused only once. I am not reduced to what this house lacks, she said. And I will not be grateful to those who tried to make me disappear politely. Then she left with Helena at her side. In the hall, the air felt easier to breathe, though Verity knew ease was not safety. Helena took her hand for one brief squeeze before releasing it. You burned no bridge, her aunt said. You merely lit it well enough to see who was standing on it. Verity almost laughed, but the sound would have broken in the middle. Give him the packet. You are certain? Verity looked back toward the closed breakfast room door. No. But I am done making certainty a condition of courage. 10 minutes later, Adrian stood alone in his study, with Helena Armitage across from him. She handed him a sealed packet without curtsy or apology. My niece said you may open this if you are ready to speak the truth where others can hear it. Adrian took it. And if I am not, Helena's eyes were merciless, then it will outlive your hesitation. When she left, he broke the plain wax. Inside lay a folded note from Verity, a copy of Agnes's statement, and a small receipt written in Croft's hand. Payment received from Her Grace the Dowager Duchess for preparation of private separation instrument and alteration of supporting account summaries. Adrian read the line once, then again. The room became very still. The truth had finally put a price beside his wife's erasure. Adrian did not summon the second council, in anger, though every servant in Stonemere House could feel anger moving ahead of him like weather. He summoned it with lists, seals, messengers, and instructions so precise that by sunset the household understood something more dangerous than a quarrel had entered the rooms. Consequence had arrived wearing the Duke's hand. He stood in his study, with Croft's receipt on the desk before him and Verity's note at it, reading neither now, because both had already burned themselves into memory. Payment received from Her Grace, the Dowager Duchess, for preparation of private separation instrument and alteration of supporting account summaries. One sentence. A price placed beside his wife's disappearance. He had seen treachery in Parliament, clothed more elegantly than this, but never had it waited at his own table, and called itself family preservation. Sir Edmund Roth arrived at first, damp at the shoulders from rain and too grave for greeting. Adrian handed him the receipt. The trustee read it once, then again, as if hoping the words would improve under scrutiny. They did not. This will not allow a quiet correction, Sir Edmund said. No. Adrian sealed a note with the Vale signet. That is no longer the aim. Your mother will understand what you are doing. She understood what she was doing. Sir Edmund looked up. And Her Grace the Duchess. Adrian's hand paused above the next sheet of paper. She will be invited. Not commanded. Good. The older man's approval was dry, but Adrian heard the weight beneath it. You have learned at least one thing before the ending. Adrian folded the invitation himself. He did not allow a secretary to compose language for the woman, whose silence had been interpreted too often by others. Verity, the council will reconvene tomorrow morning in the breakfast room with Sir Edmund, the necessary witnesses, and those whose names have touched the disputed papers. You have the right not to attend. If you do attend, your chair will be yours, and no one will question you as if you stand accused. If you do not attend, I will speak the truth regardless. He stopped there. There was more he wished to write. Forgive me. Trust me. Come back. He wrote none of it. Desire was not a summons. Regret was not reparation. He sealed the note and gave it to Mr. Bell. Place this in Mrs. Armitage's hand. If her Grace refuses an answer, you will not wait at the door. Yes, your Grace. And Bell? The butler lifted his eyes. The breakfast room is to be arranged as it was on the morning her Grace left, with one difference. Your Grace! Adrian picked up the black ribbon from the desk. It had been removed from the false settlement and set aside when the documents were examined. Her chair is not to be empty. By morning, Stone Mere House had ceased, pretending that nothing had happened. The breakfast room was opened early. Heavy curtains were drawn back to admit the grey light. The long table had been cleared of dishes, except for one silver plate placed at its center, polished so brightly that the candles reflected like small cold stars. Upon it lay the false settlement, tied once more with the black silk ribbon. The object looked smaller than its damage. That was the insult of paper. It could alter lives while occupying almost no space. Adrian entered before anyone else and stood over it. He remembered finding it beneath the morning light. He remembered the empty chair. He remembered thinking, with the arrogance of shock, that he must discover where Verity had gone. Only later had he understood the better question was where he had been while she was disappearing. Mrs. Larkin arrived with a written statement in her hand, followed by Mr. Bell, who had agreed to testify to the timing of the packet and the Dowager's knowledge of Croft's visit. Sir Edmund came with Agnes's sworn statement, taken in Kent, sealed and witnessed. Then came Lady Aveling, Mrs. Pennicott, and Mrs. Harbury, all three far less eager than they had been days earlier. Respectable observers looked different when they suspected they might be remembered as accessories to disgrace. Lady Maribel entered next, lavender replaced by white muslin that made her look younger and more frightened. She curtsied to Adrian and did not meet Verity's absent chair, Mr. Croft arrived with his folio clutched beneath one arm and indignation carefully arranged across his face. Last came Theodora Vale. She wore black. Not mourning black, though the distinction would have been invisible to most. This was battle black, silk like polished armor, diamonds cold at her ears. She looked at the plate, then at Adrian. You have staged a melodrama, she said. No, he replied, a return. She took her seat without asking which was hers. That too was habit. Habit was what he had mistaken for order all his life. The witnesses settled. Sir Edmund opened his case. Croft placed his folio on the table and kept one hand resting over it as if dignity could be held shut. Before we proceed, Croft said, I must protest the irregularity of this gathering. Matters concerning a noble household ought not to be treated as public entertainment. Adrian looked at him. Then you should not have allowed my wife's private papers to reach a musicale. A thin colour rose in Croft's face. Lady Aveling stared at the table. Maribel flinched. The door opened before Croft could reply. Verity stood at the threshold with Helena Armitage behind her. For one moment, no one breathed. She wore deep blue today, not grey, and the colour changed the room. It did not plead, it did not retreat. It belonged to rank, but also to decision. Her veil was lifted. Her face was composed. Adrian felt the force of seeing her in the breakfast room again so sharply that he had to hold still before he could speak. He moved to the chair at his left and drew it back. "Your Grace, not Verity, not before them, not as claim, as acknowledgement." She entered with measured steps. Every person at the table rose because Adrian remained standing until they did. Theodora rose last. It cost her. Verity saw it. She sat in the Duchess's chair, her gloved hands resting lightly in her lap, and only then did Adrian sit. Helena took the chair set behind her, just as before, guardian and witness together. "Thank you for attending," Adrian said to Verity. She did not soften. "I came because the lie was public enough to require witnesses." Yes, the word was not defense. It was surrender to fact. Croft cleared his throat. "If Her Grace has come to inflame what might yet be settled with grace, I must advise restraint." Verity looked at him. "You have advised me before, Mr. Croft. I found the cost excessive, Mrs." Harbury's eyes flicked toward the plate. Sir Edmund placed the original marriage settlement on the table. Beside it, he laid the copied settlement from the music-hale, the ledger page, Agnes's statement, and finally, Croft's receipt. The last paper changed the room before anyone read it. Theodora saw the shape of it. Croft saw his own hand. Maribel covered her mouth. "This council," Adrian said, "will not ask whether the Duchess was grateful enough, quiet enough, fertile enough, or obedient enough. Those questions were never evidence. They were distractions." Theodora's face hardened. "Adrian, no." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. "You have used my name, my house, and my absence. You will not use my silence." Sir Edmund adjusted his spectacles. "The papers will be read in order." Croft rose halfway. "I object to any reading of documents obtained outside proper professional confidence." "Sit down," Adrian said. Croft slowly sat. The room had learned now that the Duke's restraint was no longer uncertainty. It was control directed at last toward the proper target. Adrian placed one hand on the back of Verity's chair, not touching her, only standing near enough that everyone saw where authority had chosen to stand. Then he looked across the table at the solicitor, who had dressed erasure as law. "Mr. Croft," he said, "read aloud the line where my Duchess supposedly sold herself." Mr. Croft did not move. For a man who had spent his life making other people fear paper, he seemed suddenly afraid of the one lying before him. The breakfast room waited. The silver plate gleamed between them with the false settlement tied in black silk, and around it sat everyone who had helped give that paper weight. The mother who had ordered it, the solicitor who had shaped it, the young lady who had practiced. Another woman's name, and the witnesses who had nearly mistaken cruelty for discretion. Adrian did not repeat his command. He only looked at Croft until the solicitor's hand, pale and carefully manicured, reached for the document. The paper whispered as he opened it. "Her Grace," Croft began, then cleared his throat. "Her Grace, desiring the preservation of domestic peace and acknowledging the insufficiency of the marital union, does freely accept the sum settled upon her separate maintenance and withdraws all future claim to household governance, charitable disbursements, estate influence, and matters connected with succession." The words landed differently when read aloud by the man who had written them. Not legal now, not elegant, ugly. Verity sat very still. She had heard those clauses before in the small drawing room when they had been presented as kindness. Today they sounded like a door being locked from the outside. Adrian's voice was quiet. "Freely accepts." Did Her Grace freely accept? Croft's eyes flicked toward Theodora. The instrument was prepared in anticipation of consent. Did she consent? Not in final form. That was not my question. Sir Edmund placed the unsigned page beside the copied version. "The paper left for His Grace contains no signature from Her Grace and no witness signature. The paper displayed at Lady Maribel's musicale contains both an added witness line and initials in Her Grace's hand, or an imitation of it. Mrs. Harbury leaned forward. "Mr. Croft, are you saying a legal paper was allowed to circulate before the Duchess signed it?" Croft's expression tightened. "Madam, noble households often require delicacy before formality." Helena Armitage gave a soft, humorless laugh. "How fortunate for scoundrels that delicacy is so often silent." Theodora turned sharply. "Mrs. Armitage forgets her place." Adrian's answer came at once. "Mrs. Armitage is here at my invitation and under my protection." The room shifted again. Verity did not look at him, but her hand moved once against the folds of her gown. She had heard. Sir Edmund lifted the ledger page. "Now the account summaries. This transfer from the servants' pension reserve was authorized under Her Grace's initials. Her Grace denies the writing. I find the hand imitative. The same pressure appears in the copied settlement." He opened another paper. "Agnes Willett, formerly lady's maid to Her Grace, states that she saw this ledger after a meeting between the Dowager Duchess and Mr. Croft. She further states that she was dismissed after asking why Mrs. Hobbs' pension had not been paid." Mrs. Larkin, standing near the sideboard, closed her eyes for one brief second. Adrian saw it. So did Verity. "Mrs. Hobbs' pension will be restored today," Adrian said, "with the delayed amount and an additional allowance for distress." Theodora's mouth hardened. "You are making promises before examining the family accounts." "I am correcting a theft." The word struck the room like metal. Croft rose halfway. "Your Grace, that's an outrageous term. Then be grateful I use it here before friends of this house and not before a magistrate." Croft sat. Lady Aveling's fan trembled in her hand. The spectacle she had helped spread had become too real to enjoy. Sir Edmund then unfolded the receipt. Even before he read it, Croft's face changed. "Not much. Enough. Payment received from Her Grace the Dowager Duchess." Sir Edmund read, "For preparation of private separation instrument and alteration of supporting account summaries." Maribel made a small sound. Theodora remained upright, but one gloved hand tightened over her cane. "That paper was private correspondence." "It is a receipt," Sir Edmund said. "And it is in Mr. Croft's hand." Croft looked toward the Dowager, as if a lifetime of social order should still be able to save him. "Your Grace, I acted under family instruction, in the belief that His Grace's interests required a swift settlement." Adrian's face did not alter. "My interests did not require fraud. No fraud was intended, only pressure toward a necessary result." Verity spoke for the first time. "Pressure toward a signature is still pressure, Mr. Croft. Pressure toward a false story is still a lie." Her voice was not loud, but every face turned. She looked at Maribel next. "Lady Maribel, did you practice my hand?" The young woman's eyes filled, though tears did not fall. "I copied invitations, notes, place cards. Her Grace the Dowager said you were overwhelmed. She said it would help His Grace if the house ran smoothly. Did you know the practice sheets were used for this?" Maribel shook her head, then stopped. The truth forced its way through shame. "Not at first." Theodora's eyes cut toward her. Maribel flinched but continued. "After the musicale, I understood. I should have spoken. I didn't. I wanted everyone to think I belonged where you sat." The confession left her smaller than triumph had ever made her. Verity looked at her for a long moment. "Wanting my chair did not make it yours." Maribel bowed her head. "No." Theodora stood. "This has become theatrical. Lady Maribel is young and foolish. Mr. Croft is overzealous. I sought to preserve the family from a marriage that had become sterile in every possible sense." Adrian's chair moved back slowly. "You will not use that word again. Why? Because it wounds your wife? better wounded pride than a dead dukedom. I did what you were too sentimental, too weak, and too distracted to do. You paid a solicitor to prepare a separation. Instrument in my name. I protected you. You removed the Duchess from her apartments. I placed her where she could do less harm. You used her name on accounts. I used a name that had failed. To serve the house properly. Silence followed. It was complete. Theodora seemed to hear herself then, but not with regret, only with annoyance that the words had escaped refinement. Adrian looked at Verity. She sat very straight, and yet he saw what the room perhaps did not, the cost. The old hurt held in place by discipline. He had once mistaken that discipline for coldness. He would never make that error again. No, he said. The word was not loud. It ended something. House of Vale will not survive by erasing the woman who carried its dignity better than those born to it. Mr. Croft, you are dismissed from every matter concerning my family, my estates, my wife's settlement, and all charitable accounts connected to our name. Sir Edmund will retain the papers. Your conduct will be reported to the proper legal authorities, and to those before whom your professional reputation must answer. Croft's face went grey. Your Grace, please. We can manage this quietly. That is what you counted on. Adrian turned to Maribel. Lady Maribel, you will leave Stonemere House today, and you will not be received here again. I will not decide how society treats you. Your own confession will do that. Maribel's lips trembled. She rose and curtsied to Verity, not Adrian. It was not enough. It was the first honest thing she had done. Then Adrian faced his mother. The room seemed to hold its breath. Theodora looked back at him with the cold bravery of a woman who could lose power but not pride. You will remove to the dower house at Briarwick within the week, he said. Mrs. Larkin will receive the household keys from you today. All accounts you oversaw will pass to Sir Edmund's review. You will retain the respect due to my father's widow. You will not retain command of my wife's house. Theodora's face whitened. You would exile your own mother for her? No, Adrian said. For what you did to her, no one spoke. No one defended the dowager. Even Lady Aveling, who had repeated the earliest whispers, stared down in shame. Mrs. Harbury finally said, Her Grace the Duchess has been very wronged. The words were simple, public, necessary. Verity lowered her eyes for one moment. When she lifted them, she did not look victorious. She looked seen. Adrian moved away from her chair so that no one could mistake his authority for hers. There is more, he said. His voice changed. It lost the edge of judgment and became harder because it turned upon himself. I allowed this house to learn that my wife could be ignored without consequence. I permitted distance to pass for trust. I accepted my mother's management because it spared me inconvenience. I did not ask why the Duchess's chair grew quieter. I did not ask why her keys left her hand. I did not ask why another woman spoke where she should have been heard. He turned to Verity then, before everyone. That failure is mine. Verity's breath caught. Not enough for anyone else to hear, perhaps. Enough for him. I cannot return the years in which you were made lonely under my roof, he said. I can return the truth. I can restore what was taken. I can make sure no one in this house mistakes your silence for consent again. And if freedom from me is what dignity requires, then you shall have that too, with your name, your property, and my protection before the world. The room blurred at the edges for Verity, but she did not weep, not because the words did not touch her, because she wanted to remember them clearly. She looked at the silver plate, at the false settlement, at the black silk ribbon that had once bound her erasure together. Then she reached for the ribbon and untied it. The silk slipped loose beneath her fingers. Mrs. Larkin stepped forward, holding the household keys on a small tray. No one had instructed her aloud. Perhaps she had known the moment before any of them. Verity lifted the keys and set them on the silver plate where the false settlement lay open. The sound was small. It filled the room. "Then let us see," she said, "whether this house can learn to be honest." By autumn, Briarwick Hall had learned the sound of Verity's keys. They did not jangle nervously at her waist, or hide in a drawer beneath another woman's authority. They moved with her through the long Derbyshire corridors, in the morning silver against dark blue ribbon, a clear, bright note that servants heard before they saw her. The first time Mrs. Hobb received her restored pension, she cried into her apron in the estate office and apologized for the tears as if gratitude were untidy. Verity took her hands and said, "You served this house for 38 years. You don't need to apologize for being remembered." The story passed through the servants' hall by supper and reached the village by Sunday, not as gossip but as repair. Mr. Croft no longer handled any paper bearing the Vale name. Sir Edmund Roth had taken charge of the reviewed accounts with the grim satisfaction of a man who preferred numbers once they had stopped lying. Lady Maribel Fane had gone to stay with relations in Bath, where invitations arrived less often, and no one asked her to pour tea at another woman's table. The Dowager Duchess lived in the Dower House beyond the South Meadow, attended properly, visited dutifully, and obeyed by no one outside her own rooms. She sent one note to Briarwick Hall after her removal, written in her sharp, beautiful hand, saying only that great houses were not maintained by softness. Verity read it once, then placed it in the fire without reply. Some battles did not deserve a second audience. The hall itself had changed less than people expected, and more than Verity could have hoped. Portraits still watched from panelled walls. Footmen still moved silently across polished floors. Breakfast still arrived under silver covers. But decisions no longer travelled around her, as if she were furniture to be avoided. The housekeeper brought household books to Verity's morning room each Monday. The steward spoke to her directly about rents, repairs, and the village widows' fund. The vicar no longer addressed his thanks to Adrian for charities Verity had arranged, and every morning at 8:30, 2 plates were set at the breakfast table. At first that habit had felt almost unbearably fragile. Adrian did not demand it. He never came to her door late, never asked whether she had forgiven him because a lesser man might have mistaken her continued presence for absolution. He appeared at breakfast and waited for her to choose whether to join him. On the first morning at Briarwick, she had not. On the second, she came for 10 minutes and spoke only of the weather and a leaking roof on a tenant cottage. On the third, Adrian had placed a list beside her plate, not of commands but of questions. Which pensions should be reviewed first? Which charities had been neglected during his absence? Which servants had been punished for loyalty? She had looked at the paper for a long time before touching her cup. "This is not apology," she had said. "No," he had answered. "It is evidence." She had stayed until the coffee cooled. Evidence became a pattern. A pattern became something not yet trust, but near enough to make danger of hope. He asked before sending men to escort her into the village. He waited outside the estate office when she met with Sir Edmund, unless she invited him in. When letters came addressed only to him on matters that affected the household, he returned them with a note in his own hand. "Her Grace will answer this with me, or not at all." Once, when a visiting cousin laughed that Adrian had become a clerk to his wife's conscience, Adrian said, "I should have begun years ago," and let the silence correct the man. Verity heard of it from Mrs. Larkin, who pretended not to enjoy repeating the story. Not all healing arrived grandly. Some of it came as a corrected envelope, a chair pulled out, and then left. a question asked without insistence. Some of it came in the way Adrian no longer spoke over her when others looked to him first. The strangest part was not that he changed. The strangest part was that he continued changing after the witnesses were gone. One cool October morning, Verity found the black silk ribbon in the drawer of the small writing desk at Briarwick. She had brought it from London without knowing why, folded beside the unsigned papers that now lay locked in Sir Edmund's files. The ribbon looked harmless in daylight, soft, narrow, almost pretty. She touched it and remembered the small drawing room, the settlement, the empty line waiting for her name, the carriage without crest. Then she closed the drawer again. She did not need to look at the wound every day to prove it had happened. That afternoon, Adrian found her in the west breakfast room, the smaller one that looked over the lawns rolling toward the dower house and the line of copper beeches beyond it. Rain had cleared from the glass, and the world outside shone with that washed English brightness that made every leaf look newly decided. Verity stood with the household keys in her hand, considering the lock of a cabinet that had not opened since the late Duke's time. Adrian stopped at the threshold. He did that now. He waited to be invited into rooms where she stood alone. "Come in," she said. He entered, carrying no papers for once. The simplicity of him without a document almost made her smile. He looked at the keys, then at the cabinet. "Does it resist you?" "Everything in this family has resisted me at least once." His mouth moved, not quite amusement, not quite pain. "Then I pity the cabinet." She tried the third key. The lock turned. Inside lay old household inventories, a cracked porcelain shepherdess, and a bundle of menus from 20 years before. Nothing important, nothing dangerous. Verity laughed softly, surprised by the sound. Adrian looked at her as if the room had offered him something he did not deserve to touch. "It was only dust," she said. "I know you look astonished." "I am." She turned, keys resting in her palm. "By dust, by hearing you laugh in my house." The words were quiet, and because they were quiet, they did not ask for comfort. Verity looked down at the keys. For months she had carried them as proof, authority, answer. Only recently had they begun to feel like something else. Not a chain, not armor, work, choice. Home, perhaps, though she was careful with that word. Adrian came no closer. "May I ask you something?" "You may ask." "Do you think there will come a day when you can love me again?" There it was. No audience, no silver plate, no witnesses to make courage easier. Just a man in a quiet room asking for what he had once failed to protect. Verity felt the old ache rise, not as a blade now, but as a scar touched by weather. She could have punished him with silence. She could have offered mercy too cheaply. She chose neither. "I cannot return to the woman who loved you by making herself small." He accepted that with a bow of his head. "I would not ask you to, and I cannot promise that trust will arrive because you have finally told the truth." "I know. Do you?" He looked at her then, steady and unguarded. "I know I am not owed the peace you bring into a room. I know a public correction does not repair private loneliness. I know every morning you choose to sit across from me is not proof that the wound has vanished. It is proof that you are braver than I have any right to expect." Verity's fingers closed gently around the keys. Outside, the lawn sloped toward the dower house, where Theodora lived with her pride and fewer instruments of harm. Beyond that stood the village whose widows would receive their due before winter. Behind Verity lay the cabinet that had opened to nothing but dust. Before her stood the husband who had once been too late and was learning, day by day, not to be absent. "Then I can promise this," she said. "I will not go back, but I may choose forward if you keep choosing truth when no one applauds you for it." Adrian's breath left him slowly. "I will." She held out the key ring. not to surrender it. To share the weight for one moment, he understood. His hand came beneath hers, not over it, and together they held the keys between them while the afternoon light moved across the floor. There was no kiss to satisfy a room, no applause, no sudden forgetting. Only the restrained tenderness of two people stand before a locked house and deciding, together, which doors deserved opening. Later, when the breakfast table was laid, Verity placed the black silk ribbon in the back of the writing desk drawer and turned the key. In the west breakfast room, 2 plates waited side by side, empty of false papers, warmed by the fire, and set beneath the quiet shine of morning silver. Verity sat first. Adrian waited until she looked up and nodded. Then he took the chair across from her, not as a duke receiving his household, but as a husband permitted, at last, to remain.